Resilience or motivation is a muscle that we have to continue to build. We all have these invisible brain patterns that quietly run our lives. And sometimes it's just us getting in our own way. You can't come up with that creative, innovative solution if you're in that state, if you're in survival mode.
So last time we talked, you were heading to the Olympics to actually be there to support the Canadian team. What was that like?
I mean, each Olympics is so unique in and of itself, right? I've had the honor of being at 3 different ones. And so my first one, London 2012, I was just a little baby rookie coming in, and getting my feet wet. At that point, our team wasn't actually really expected to even be there. Throughout my career, it's been really interesting to be part of the building of something. Because when we started, I think our team was maybe 22nd in the world or something along those lines, not making any waves. And over the years from London 2012, my first Olympics, to Rio 2016, moving into a leadership position, coming more of a vet, and then Tokyo 2020, which ended up happening in 2021 because of the pandemics.
That's right.
So we were bumped out a year, and that was actually supposed to be my last year playing. I had already kind of planned my career progression and ended off that on a high note for myself personally, because I ended up bearing the flag for Team Canada, which was just incredible. Fun side note about that, to our point about London being an incredible place with incredible people, while I did the opening ceremonies and bore the flag for Team Canada, do you remember who was the closing ceremony?
No.
Flag bearer for?
No, who was it?
Damian Warner.
No way. Also, awesome.
2 London natives brought the flag in and brought it out for the entire Team Canada.
Incredible.
Which is so cool. I love that. So London representing on the global stage. And by the time I retired, our team was number 4 in the world.
Crazy.
Consistently in those big moments. Positioned to medal. We didn't medal during my time. That's like the one thing that was left on the court, but that's sports, right? And so I've just been really blessed throughout my entire career, and excited to be back in London as well, my hometown.
And then the recent Olympics you went to, what was your role when you went there?
So I just started again just in this past year. Team Canada brought me in, or I should say Canada Basketball brought me in as a leadership and performance consultant with our team. So it's interesting to be back with the team and in a different role, and kind of behind the scenes of all the stuff that you don't get a look at as an athlete. And so supporting both the staff and the athletes as an ear sometimes, a mentor sometimes, a sounding board, because we're in high pressure situations. So there's both the preparation that's required to make sure that you're mentally in the right frame of mind, and then also like touches while you're in the middle of World Championships or the Olympics or whatever it might be.
Yeah, because the mental does affect the physical, right? Like it's funny, you walked in here and like, how's your day? I'm like, insane. I need a therapy session from you. I realized recently that if my stress load is really high, I'm not eating the best, or I'm not getting the right rest, it actually trickles into the business decisions that we may be making, how you show up for things like this. And I just thought of something as you were talking about being there to help both the athletes and the staff. There's an ecosystem between those two that has to be in alignment. And like, you're sitting atop watching the complexities of everything that's happening, probably realizing this is happening with this athlete, which is affecting this situation. So like, how do you manage those dynamics with multiple people that are all trying to achieve the same goal?
It's a great point, because high performance, we often look at it at an individual basis. But anybody who knows anything about working at a high level knows there's always a team behind that person, even if there's only one front-facing person. Obviously, with the national team, there is a literal team here. Lots of interpersonal stuff that goes on in between that. So whenever we talk about culture with a team, it always boils down to, yes, what are we doing collectively? What are our collective values? But also, what am I doing? What is the self-leadership that I'm employing in these spaces? Because high responsibility, high ownership people are the ones that make a really strong culture. So there's that dynamic going on. But back to your previous point around the mentality being such a big part of what we do. And as high performers, we always say playing the game, whether that's on the court or in the office or at home, like 90% of it is mental. Especially when you're operating at a high level. For example, we'll take the Olympics again.
Sure.
Everybody's good. Like everybody's in the top 0.0000001% of people in their field.
8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah. And so you have the skills, but have you practiced the state that you need to be in order to access those skills? Coming back to your thought around even having the cognitive bandwidth to show up in this moment, right? Yeah. And that's something that you can practice and develop and build.
Yeah. I'm obsessive about studying people that are successful. Something else I learned recently was, 15-minute gaps before my meetings and just breathing and just like turning everything off. You're not falling forward, right? So like, I'd be so curious about like, what are things that you see top performers do that separate them from the rest of the world, I guess?
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned one thing that is so simple. It's taking care of the 1%ers. We're not really usually talking about an overhaul of everything that we're doing. It's about being really intentional about what you are doing with the time, energy, and resources that you are given. And so one thing I see with high performers, and the thing that separates high performers who are performing consistently and those who are kind of bumping up against a little bit of friction or having a little bit of inconsistency, is zooming in on some of those small moments, whether it's adding in a block of time to actually settle your nervous system so that you're coming in with the type of energy and focus that you need. That requires previous planning and repetitions of, okay, what type of breath am I going to do in here? How long am I going to do that for? How many reps am I going to do? Because sometimes I would say it's like expecting to hit a big shot in the game when you haven't gotten any reps in practice.
Of course.
Like, what do you mean? You might hit one of those crazy shots for sure. That's going to happen every once in a while, especially when you have a certain level of skill, but you're not going to be able to do it consistently. So practice so that you can show up in the game.
Yeah, Tom Brady, I saw him say something recently where he's like, I practice like it's the Super Bowl. Every time he's at practice, so if you show up, it's just another day.
Yeah.
Where a lot of other people, they don't turn it on until they're actually in competition. And then they maybe feel good about how they're executing, but they're executing with an average group of people versus the top performers The other thing I noticed too, I have this thing at my house called the Wall of Champions, and it's photos of like Lewis Hamilton, George St. Pierre, Ken Block, like Billy Graham, all these people that were like, they're all not looking at the camera, and they look like they're competing with themselves. Regardless of what the world's saying about them, you can tell that they are literally just trying to be excellent at what they do, regardless of the 8 billion people on the planet. Do you see that in top performers, that they're very driven with self-improvement and self-competition versus worrying about what everybody else is doing?
I think that speaks to understanding your why. Getting clear on why you're showing up on a daily basis. Where is your focus? Because if it's on external things, aka the people around you or what this person over there is doing, it's obviously going to distract from your goal and maybe deviate your attention from the things that you do need to attend to. So yes, I do think that people who are in these places, high performers, are very self-motivated, but I'll put a big asterisk beside that.
Sure.
Because I have a love-hate relationship with motivation. I think there's a lot of myths around motivation. We assume that we are either born like motivated or disciplined. There might be a kernel of truth. We might have a propensity towards that. But again, it's a skill that we can build and stoke. I, for example, don't think that I'm super internally motivated. I have just had a lifetime of habits that have built that kind of give me a little bit of tendency towards these things. And big bonus, this is a lesson that I learned when I retired from basketball. If you don't continue to practice that, it will reduce, it will kind of flag. And so resilience or motivation is a muscle that we have to continue to build. I'll give an example of how I did that in my own life. It's kind of a random example, and I'm surprised that I even chose this pathway when I retired from sports, because when I retired, I said, like, I'm never going to run again in my life, because I was just doing that for 20 years.
For conditioning, for sports.
Exactly. So it's quite regimented. I put my body through all sorts of things for sure. But I was like, I'm never going to run it again once I retire, unless there's an axe murderer against me and I must leave. But at the end of summer this past year, fall, I decided to do 100 days of running. So showing up for 100 days in a row. I had a minimum, but there were really a lot of other rules that went along with that. And it was really just to do something hard. So that was flexing the muscle.
Sure.
So that I would remember to show up every day and prove to myself, you can do hard things on a regular basis. And that flows and ripples into so many other areas of my life. And I continued it to this day. I think I'm on day 160 or 70 or something like that. So we see that the small little decisions we make on a daily basis circle into and fuel how we show up and how we perform on a day-to-day basis.
100%. I could say, like myself, I was a mess when I was a kid, right? I got around the wrong people, and I was very influential at the time. Made bad decisions until I found people that I admired, and I started looking at the decisions they were making. They would wake up early, they had a plan, they had goals, they didn't consume substances, all these different things that led me to like make these little micro adjustments. And then all of a sudden, same thing like you said, like I'm probably not the most disciplined person or the most motivated person, but the compound momentum of the choices almost feels like a superpower or these little unlocks. And then you like look for patterns out there in the world from other people. And I think like being focused on your own game is super important. In our world in real estate, it's so easy to be like, well, how come those people are getting all those views on those posts? And you look at what other people are doing. Same thing in competition. You may wonder like, how is that girl so good at hitting 3-pointers? But you don't have her background. You don't have her physiology. It may be good to see what's happening and be aware of it. Well, the pattern that I noticed was not being attached to the outcomes, more just noticing your own self patterns, doing things like time audits. Where are you spending your energy and your resources? Is it in alignment with your goals? And then not being too precious to like be honest with yourself when you need to change them, right? Which is probably one of the biggest challenges that you see when you deal with high performers.
Oh, for sure. And you mentioned a word that I could geek out on for hours and hours, just like patterns, trends, themes, however you want to frame it. I work mainly with my clients, whether those are athletes or just high performers, entrepreneurs, professionals in the corporate space. We all have these invisible brain patterns that quietly run our lives. And sometimes it's just us getting in our own way. But I think the really juicy part is when we are able to identify those, being aware when they're kind of being triggered and in high alert, and how we can actually leverage those and get out of our own way so that we can show up with that ease and flow that we all want in life and in work. And that's focusing on the process, to your point, because we can't get caught up on the outcome, the results. Often that's out of our hands, but we can figure out how we can regulate how we react to things, how we can show up, our focus, attention, and our confidence.
Yeah, and confidence is a huge part of it too. I mean, in our business, it's 90% confidence, because if I'm sitting with you, you want to know I know how to fly the plane. You're like, you're gonna sell my house. Like, it's a huge asset. I don't have all you. I need somebody I trust. I know I need somebody that can actually execute. And do you know your stuff, right? So like when we go into meetings, a lot of it, part of it is confidence for sure, but then we back it up with data. Here's our case studies. Here's how our system works and the patterns of what we've done and the results we've gotten in the past. When you're trying to extrapolate those patterns, like if you came in and you're like, I want to open up your brain, Justin, and figure out what patterns we could tweak. How do you figure out the patterns that I have to diagnose?
Honestly, a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'm asking you.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to figure out what's going on. I'll be asking you questions and digging a little bit deeper.
Sure.
But the question is, like, you already kind of know where the friction is, right? For example,
How much time do you? You're just kidding. Yeah.
no, this is great. Like, even in your work and business, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, where do you feel the most friction in your life?
Well, a limiting belief is that, so say you hired me, let's just say I sold your house, crushed it, and you're like, I want to open a 10,000 square foot office so I could have people in there, have my team for Miranda Media.
Yeah.
And you needed the commercial side of my business.
Yeah.
I'm an expert in commercial real estate. It's what I started in. But my limiting belief is you need to talk to me 24/7 when in reality, you need, say, Roger Horvath to come in and help you with that execution. You need Lynette Gagne to come in and help be the tenant acquisition piece, who they're actually better equipped than I am. They know the actual product better than I do. And they have the strategy and the back end, which is what you're buying. You actually want the trust, the systems, the accountability, me, but you want the expert. Where in my brain, because I built it from nothing, I feel like I always have to be the one making the phone call, when you don't probably feel that way. You're like, no, I just want the job done. I don't care if it's Roger Bennett, you that executes. Hence, that's probably one of my biggest limiting beliefs.
It's so interesting that regardless of what we do, whether it's big or small, there's always that voice going on in our head that's telling us something. And usually it's always something judgmental of like,
For sure.
I'm not good enough, my systems aren't good enough, or this isn't the right way, everybody else is doing it like this. I call that the judge. And the way that I structure my practice is based on positive intelligence. It's a type of mental performance framework that I think is really useful, especially for high performers.
Okay.
There's a bunch of different performance archetypes, which I think is really interesting. Not so much that we need to know exactly what mode we are always in, but just to be able to identify, okay, this is being kind of flagged right now, whether it's the judge or one of my top saboteurs, we'll call them, is the stickler. So like perfectionism,
Sure.
like, okay, I gotta tweak this just right, or like, no, this needs to happen before I do this.
And then it never gets done.
And then it never gets done.
sure.
Yeah, that's the cost of that saboteur. Or there's like the hyperachiever, which I always get pushed back on this one because we hear the word achieve and we're like, that's a good thing. That's why I'm good at what I do. But our saboteurs or our limiting beliefs are always rooted in our strengths. They only become saboteurs when they're overused and abused. So it's almost like a sliding scale or a spectrum. Yes, there's so much about, for example, your hyperachiever that makes you get up in the morning, work hard,
Sure.
bring a certain level of excellence to what you do. But it's also the thing that's causing your stress,
Of course.
your lack of sleep,
Yeah.
that tension that you feel, that pressure, that irritability, maybe lack of ability to hand off things to other people in your team. So it's a both and, just becomes a saboteur when it's overused and abused.
Yeah.
And so being able to identify, okay, where is that coming from? We're not talking about a whole therapy session of like why that showed up in the first place and what
I fell off a tree when I was 7 years old, and now here you are. Yeah.
what event in your childhood led you to that place. There's a time and a place.
Sure.
Wearing badge.
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of a meeting, we don't got time for all that.
Thank you, sir.
All we need to do is, okay, I'm aware. Okay, how can I then shift my attention back to something that will help me show up to what is required right here? And there's a lot of different strategies that you can use. I'm sure people see them on TikTok and Instagram all the time. But I think it's interesting to understand just the almost neurophysiology behind that, because when we're in those saboteur states or limiting belief states, that's like saboteur mode, to call it. That back brain of like, I'm just trying to survive. I'm in like threat protection, self-protection mode. That's when we tense up. and we're not able to perform in the basketball world, like literally, if I'm tense, I'm not going to make the shot.
100%.
It's quite black and white.
People can feel it. I could tell you, even in my world, right? Like if I walk into an appointment and I'm tense, you're asking me for commission reductions, you want me to price it at a crazy price, all these things, I'm interviewing another agent, and I tense up, you can feel it on me too. That confidence level drops, your confidence in me drops because you can feel it on me as well too. And there's so much of what you're saying that is true, because oftentimes we have that voice in our head that's speaking things to us that have kernels of truth for sure, but also opportunities that are baked in. So if I use that communication scenario I gave you earlier, well, baked into that is, no, I don't want to disconnect from Miranda at all, because the relationship's really important to me, that if we are handling that commercial lease for you, all I need to do is simply put, is make sure there's milestones in place, that it is getting my eyes on it. And maybe I am having a conversation with you at the most important parts of the transaction to verify everything's perfect. And that's a simple solution to a complex problem where you don't need to talk to me every single day. You probably don't want to. But when we get to those milestones, we good, awesome. Everything's checked over in the lease. We're good for 5 years. Thank you so much. High five and move on, right? Like if I'm just self-defeating about that mentality and negative about it, I miss the opportunity to change the pattern or change the system, right?
100%. And the interesting thing about that example that you gave is you can't come up with that creative, innovative solution if you're in that state. If you're in survival mode,
of course,
in self-protection mode. This is what I'm talking about when half of performance is just getting out of your own way. So if we're able to get out of our own way and literally change our state to access that prefrontal cortex, which we know is linked to greater focus, greater creativity, better communication, then I'm able to make a great decision around, okay, what actually can we implement that makes my life easier? But you have to bridge the gap between survival mode to flow mode before you can access that.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I talked to my wife, Shannon, who's my best friend, business partner, everything. I called her this morning, dumped a whole bunch of stuff, and then ended the call. And I called her back. I was like, hey, we're in a great spot. And I've said business-wise, relationship-wise, everything else as well too. I just want to make sure I took a second to breathe because I was so highly caffeinated. And there were so many things I dropped that like, I don't want her to carry any of that stress through the day. She's just my best friend, the person that I talk to about stuff. And I'm like, here's everything that's happening. See you later. And I called, like, I was driving, like, oh wait, maybe now she's taking on the mental load that she needs to be responsible for those things when I've got it, like it's handled. So I'll literally listen to a nice song for 10 minutes, called her back after in a very different energy pattern, just saying, just so you know, we're killing it. Like, I know we always feel like we're just getting started. When we look at what we're doing in our space, we're at like the top tier, definitely in our local market and nationally, which is crazy because we built this from nothing. So like, let's take a second and appreciate that. Like somebody like you, when you're in the Olympics competing at the highest level, it's something I've noticed in high achievers is they always just feel like they're just getting started. Like even if they're at the peak, it's like they're in the gym and they're still like day one mentality. Where does that come from?
Oh, I feel like it's hard to say on an individual basis, obviously. But
and maybe not everybody's like that.
Yeah, no, I think you are tapping into something interesting. But before we get into that, I just want to call out, like you, with that example with your wife, highlighting everything that we've talked about thus far.
Emotional stress dumping, calling back, and like that up and down.
The good things, that obviously you've done a lot of work in this area of being aware of the dynamics, even that communication of what that could have done to your wife, the other person on the other side of the line, recognizing it, naming it, implementing some sort of kind of regulation or grounding technique, listening to a song, bringing your energy down, and then going back and doing that. There's so many different modalities, even within that short time frame. That's what we're talking about. That's part of high performance. Recognizing, making a shift, and doing better. And a lot of people are always like, I need to be always like this.
You're never going to be that.
It's never going to be that. Perfection doesn't exist. resilience is not the lack of stress or fear or whatever it is. It's just like, how do we bounce back?
Yeah.
And how quick is my recovery time as well? So awareness and recovery is such a huge part of performance that we skip over, but often it takes like 30 seconds, a few minutes, and you just sprinkle that throughout your day, and you're performing at a higher level.
Yeah, it's everything you're saying is anchoring so well. Nico, the creative director who's shooting this podcast right now, I joked his birthday's coming up that he just sent him an RMT, like, get from a physio for the amount of work he's done. He's probably putting 50 hours shooting, editing. Like, I want to talk about that though, from seasons of high performance where it's like, hey, you're going to sacrifice, you're going to feel burnt out, like you're going to push your body to the limit. And it's okay to feel that way sometimes. Like there's probably a physiology, mental connection there to go through seasons like that. But how do you regulate that? Like, how do you know when you're at your limit versus pulling back and needing to recover?
100%. Seasonality is such a huge part of this discussion that we're having today. One thing I love to take from the high performance sporting world into the high performance business entrepreneur world is we have recovery and seasons literally built into our performance cycle.
Interesting.
So we have peak times and we have recovery times that are in the timeline of what we're doing. How many business people do you know that have that?
Yeah, not many.
There might be people who are like, okay, this is going to be a busy season and I'll put a vacation here. We've talked about that.
Yeah, keep it. I should get down the rhythm.
which is great. But also there's many peaks and furloughs
100%.
even throughout a business week, a business day.
Yeah, for sure.
Taking those pauses and breaks as well. And I think that's a competitive edge as well, especially as thought leaders or people who use our brains a lot. You need to be aware of the cognitive load that you're taking day to day to day, and being able to reset that and come fresh to what you're doing is literally part of your performance plan.
Yeah, there's so much truth to that as well. From a planning perspective, our real estate cycle is the same every year. Like we notice January to May 24 can ramp up and get really busy, and then people leave for a vacation. Just call it June to fall. Kids are back in school. Everybody wants to look at houses again. Fall till December 4th, 50-ish drops off a cliff. And like that pattern that you'll notice, there's meeting cycles that happen all throughout each quarter. And it's took us a decade to figure it out. But we'd even planned a lot of what we're doing in our own ecosystem around those peaks and valleys, and like trying to regulate when you turn it on, when you turn it off. But there's a lot of unknowns in our industry where a war can break out one week and change the whole dynamics of the price of oil. And then other things can happen the week after. And the government of Canada says we're giving $130,000 off every new home. It's like probably same thing in sports, right? Like you build these patterns, you build this foundation, so it's there, so you can recall on when you need it. But sports is so chaotic. Yeah. Is it just the constant practice that allows you to access it when you need it, or just become muscle memory? Like where does the discipline of the practice lead into execution on game day? And how do you activate those modalities?
I think something that we know is important, and it's almost boring to say, but we're going to repeat it because there's a reason why it's said so much, is just your routine or your rituals, your daily routines and rituals. Obviously, as an athlete, we're training every day. But I think what, again, sets apart high performers from people who are just mage that stayed in or maybe tapering off is what are they doing before they even get into the gym? How are they waking up in the morning? What are they doing and taking in? At the top of your day, how are you shaping how your brain is reacting to those things around you? Like, it's funny, like I'm almost bored myself as I'm saying it because we've heard it so many times, but the majority of people aren't actually really attentional with what they're intaking in and what they're doing.
They wake up and they scroll TikTok,
for example.
Yeah.
100
brain rot, right?
And then sometimes I'm freaking to the quagger too. Like
we all fall into those patterns, but recognizing it at this D, that there's I think everything moderation, including moderation. Because like, again, I had an addictive personality in the past. And then I realized like I can be addicted to success and work. Like, I can get addicted to working out, and all of these things become a crutch if I'm not the one that's actually in charge of when I'm using it or how I'm using it or what I'm using it for, right?
That's such a huge piece of that, like a self-command. Am I the one who's choosing to scroll?
Yeah.
Versus I felt a little uncomfy based on an email that I got, and then I'm just wow.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
For sure, that 100%. Something terrible happens, and you go to the dopamine hits. You go to TikTok, junk food, all of the things that you know are going to hold you back from your goals because they give you instant relief. But do they? Because usually you end up feeling worse after going down that pathway. Versus going for a walk, or stretching, or playing a musical instrument, or reading a book, which inherently is like, oh, like you don't want to do it, but you always feel better after doing those things than the last, right?
That's why there's 1%ers in the world, because they're the 1% of things, or the 9% of things that we don't want to do, right? You're not breaking faces. But I think sometimes people get caught up with having to do all of the things, like I need to go for an hour workout. Or you can,
I need to see in the green zone on my group watch and do all the things and have my salt and do this and like, yeah, do everything.
Or you could just stand up and do 10 squats. Or literally stare out your window and reset your optical nerves after having stared at a digital screen for so long. It's like micro breaks, but like that compounds over time, and that builds healthy recovery cycles into your day, that then you can look back over your week and be like, oh, okay, I actually was a little bit more balanced and regulated en masse over the entirety of the week that I would have if I wasn't being intentional with adding these into my performance cycle.
Yeah, it's such a good way to frame it too, because people will work out in the morning and think I checked that box for the whole day. They run themselves ragged throughout the rest of the day and not take a moment at noon or whatever that looks like. Even the optical nerve thing, like there's a lot of the words you're using in this discussion deal with a lot of the mental and the physical connection, right? So you mentioned obviously the physiology of high performers. What are a few key things? I guess what would be like the top 3 things that people don't even know top performers are doing that they're not?
I'll give you a visual example. Whether it's basketball, my sport, and you're looking at like a free throw at the end of that game, or it's the kicker who's coming on the field. Those like, end of game clutch moments where literally everyone's eyes are on you. It might be loud, it might be quiet, depending on what city you're in. I don't know which one is worse.
Yeah. But that held breath moment that everybody's just
Exactly. And what do you usually see a player do in those moments in your experience?
If I'm thinking of a kicker or thinking of a free throw, they're doing whatever their patterns are, right? So if you're hitting again, you're the basketball pro not me, but they always seem to have the exact same pattern that they've done at the gym a million times. They hit that free throw because of that consistency. So they're usually shutting out all of the noise, doing some sort of pattern, or then execute the task.
Exactly. Doing some sort of routine, which helps them shut out the noise. And how they do that, the behind the scenes version, is the tendency in those moments is to get in your head, to overthink. But we know that's the
worst.
That's the worst thing to do for high performance. We need to trust the practice, all the rest that we've done up to this point. So we actually don't want to think. When we think about how people describe the flow state, it's like you're almost just like everything's clicking. You can see
Out of body,
three steps ahead. I'm not even thinking. I often describe like when I'm in flow state, when I was playing specifically, it's almost like I felt unconscious. Like, I'm not controlling this. I'm just here. I'm moving. So that's the opposite of what we tend to be in. Like clutch or choking in those moments is us succumbing to that survival moment that we talked about earlier, where we're overthinking. So what you described is them intentionally kind of pressing the reset button and getting out of their brain and into their body. So out of their brain and into their body, specifically for high performers and overthinkers, is how we reset and level set in those moments. So how you bring your attention to one of your senses, for example, whether it's your hearing. Am I tuning into the noise of the crowd? Am I tuning into the drums specifically? Am I tuning into the crunch of my shoes on the soil with whatever terrain you're on? Am I feeling the fabric of my jersey or my suit or whatever it is? Sometimes I'll literally rub my two fingers, my thumb and my finger together, because if you do it with such extreme attention, you can feel your little fingerprint kind of. And why we tune into one of our senses, we have 5 senses, so pick your poison or choose your batter, is we can't focus on 2 things at once. We're directing all of our attention to that sense, to that routine, to that thing, so that we're no longer overthinking. Mm-hmm. We're not thinking about what people are thinking about me, what they're doing, what should I do next. And then we're actually able to be in present moment. It's that bridge from survival mode into flow mode. It might not work 100% of the time, but it's going to drastically improve your chances of succeeding.
There's one thing, I heard this years ago, it was around the Navy SEALs, and when they were going to go on deployment, they do a patterned box breathing. So 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, basically repeat that 4 times. And I remember going to listening appointments, appointment to appointment, just falling forward and starting to do that, turning off certain music and certain songs made all the difference in the world. And whether people are listening or watching this, I think it begs the question, do you have anything in your life that you use as a reset? And there's certain music, again, before I go my way back, I wasn't listening to a high BPM song that would get me fired up to maybe go conquer the world. I was trying to listen to something that just soothes and calms. And I think I love being conscious of the physiology of everything you're talking about, because I think it trickles into how we're executing, right? Where sometimes you have to be in a high energy, confident, conquer the world mentality. In other places, you need to just be in flow and disconnected from the outcome to get the result that you want. But it's our biggest enemy is always that negative self-talk, getting clunky, and that's when the choking usually happens in all worlds, is usually when we're overthinking it and overcomplicating something that doesn't need to be that complicated.
Exactly. That's when you can take a step back, choose your reset option, and there re-hijack the physiological,
the nervous system.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
So sight, smell.
Yep.
I guess non-salts would work. Sound, touch, all of those, and taste, all of those things, you could always pick something in each of those to be a trigger for you.
100%. And it's so interesting because it's something that's accessible to us wherever we go. We bring our senses wherever we go. And you can see the flip side. If, for example, if you've ever seen someone having panic attack, this is the extreme, right? They're breathing fast, out of control. If you're standing in front of someone who's having a panic attack, it's almost like they can't see you, they can't hear you.
The whole system's overloaded. The eyes should be going all over the place, and
And if we think about our whole life, we've had something similar, maybe not to that effect, but when you are stressed or in a pressure situation, your body does mimic some of those things.
Sure.
For good reason. It's for survival. It enables us to focus in on whatever the threat is, but sometimes it just goes overboard. But my favorite interesting fact about how our body reacts in these moments is that our vision literally narrows. So talking about tunnel vision, our vision literally physiologically narrows at whatever the threat is. Our peripheral vision and our hearing reduces in order to pick up those small sounds that also might be a threat. Our heart rate increases. We know those other things, sweaty palms, physiologically all useful if you want to run away from a threat.
Yeah.
less useful in the boardroom or it's preparing to do a presentation or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's why so many people use breath as the reverse hijack of like, how do I calm my breathing, my heart rate down to a space where I can literally see more clearly and be able to then access those options, those next steps that are required in this scenario.
Yeah, I remember actually I was in a really tough negotiation situation where, again, like you can get a phone call on a massive file, get a response from a counter offer, or somebody says something in the negotiation that throws you completely off base, and part of the strategy of negotiation that gives you that actual response. Like you get an adrenal dump here, it's a very high stakes situation. But I remember I had just got back from jiu-jitsu class years ago. And I remember the agent I was dealing with was so rude. He said something to me that was so demeaning, because they do that to get you off posture so that you're not focused on the actual task. And I remember I did the negotiation and the agent was with me. He's like, man, you didn't even respond. I was like, I literally had a guy choking me to an hour me. Like, if that's the worst thing that's going to happen to me today, I'm good. Like, I was joking with the guy, which he actually was on his back foot because he expected me to get all angry at his comment. And I was like, all right, let's just focus on the deal. Like, if we get the deal, then we get the deal. Then if we don't, well, it's actually the outcome. Like, literally, it's just been a game where guys were trying to kill me an hour ago. So whatever. I think that stress exposure and being able to inoculate yourself to the physiological response is what, again, top performers that I see, they're stoic because they put themselves in that situation. They put themselves in failure, discomfort around people that are better than them. They know there's people better than them. They don't have a false sense of what is going to happen, but they're not defined by what's going to happen. It just is. They go in, they execute, and they're conscious of those. The question I had for you, all of that, if you were coaching Miranda in 2012, what would you tell yourself that maybe you didn't know then?
Oh, 10 million things. I often think in the work that I do now, like, man, I wish I knew this when I was playing. Obviously, there's elegance that I did know when I was playing, but there's always things that you want to refine. Attention is such a huge thing. We've touched on it today. I wish I was better at directing my attention, that self-command that we talked about, of being able to let go of external thoughts or opinions. So I was able to focus on what I was doing. I find in sports, in the high performance space, there's so much pressure to do your skill well, but also impress your coach. Make sure that your teammates trust you. Make sure that
Balancing so many things.
make sure that your performance is good enough that you're not going to lose your contract in the professional space. There's so many things that you can think about, and I think I let too many of those crowd my mind.
Sure.
So again, taking up cognitive space, where if I was able to preemptively offload some of those and in the moment as well have some of these reset moments that we talked about, just micro moments, that would enable me to access flow more often. So just building a routine and an awareness around that at an earlier age. And I was kind of forced into that my second year overseas when I injured my back.
Oh, okay.
I was in practice. It was my own teammate, unfortunately, because you practice at a high level, right? And I didn't see her coming, and she just, like, for whatever reason, ran directly into me. And so after that practice, I couldn't sit without pain. I could stand without pain. I could sleep without pain. And I didn't actually have a good medical support staff at that particular team I was with. I was playing at Istanbul at the time. And it wasn't until later that I realized I was attempting to play professional basketball with herniated disc, which anybody who has experienced that, or bulging disc,
that's crazy.
That's excruciating pain. And so it's just like what was a physical injury ended up kind of spiraling into mentally, I was questioning everything.
For sure.
I thought it was mean. I thought I just was performing poorly because my body was just trying to protect me from myself. And so that was the first moment that really made me consider, oh, there's a real mind-body connection here. And I can see the negative effects if my mind is on the right spot. So that also means that I can do things in the reverse way to build my mental capacity that will help my performance going forward.
Yeah. And just being self-aware, recognizing it, and then doing something to change it probably made all the difference, right?
100%.
Yeah. So I guess what's next for you? Obviously, you just came back from the Olympics. You're in the performance coaching world. Like, what are the next steps in your career in the book?
Yeah, I'm excited for what's next. I work with some really incredible clients. My only athlete portfolio is the Olympic team currently, but I work with a lot of passionate entrepreneurs and professionals who are trying to level up their game in all the ways that we just have talked about. Sure. I'm really passionate about sustainable performance because I think it's important to know what we're working towards and doing it in a healthy way, whether that's physically or mentally. And in a way that's also values aligned, because we don't want to end up at the finish line and
For what?
Yeah. Exactly. And that happens often, right? And so I like to support people in those areas. So as you mentioned, I work with clients one-on-one. I also work with teams and organizations who are trying to like do this all together. So we're coming into doing workshops or speaking.
We're gonna have to get you into the front squat. We do call elite training, but we get together and it's the gym for us. We just stay around and talk about things. I'll bring you to do one of those. If anybody's watching or listening, reach out to us with how to make a connection to Miranda as well. The last question that I have for you: if you were standing at the top of the tallest building on the planet and everybody could hear you, what would be the one message you want to leave people with today when it comes to high performance?
Whoa, when it comes to high performance.
Or anything on your heart. It doesn't have to be specifically for high performance.
Oh, one thing I think in high performance and in life, to our point today, I think don't overlook the physical component of what you try to do mentally. So make yourself stronger mentally, but also physically. Okay, literally move your body and explore that connection. And for me personally, I'm a person of faith, so praying more, starting my day really intentionally,
For sure.
is such a game changer.
Yeah, changed everything in my life too, just checking in, because if your heart's not right with God, then mentally you're not in a space to take care of yourself. When you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to take care of your family or friends. If they're not taken care of, you're not going to have fun. And if you're not doing those first four things, you're not going to make any money because nobody's going to want to be around you, right? So,
Exactly.
well, I appreciate you making the time to be here, and I'm excited to do a follow-up. Maybe we'll do one on the track. And the Prime teams are going to be super excited to have you in to do some coaching with them as well. So,
Such a pleasure being here with you, Justin. Thank you.
thank you.